So when I catch my face in the rearview mirror, I kind of notice that my eyebrows are getting kind of pointy, like right in the middle there. You know, kind of like Michael Keaton's. I could be the vulture. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get this show on the road. So we're gonna come to another first for me, which is a motherboard review. And this time we have the Aorus Z270X Gaming 7 to look at. Now before I go into that, I just wanted to ask one quick question. So would you prefer a motherboard review where we do the whole video, which might be a little bit longer, and then I just hyperlink timestamps in the description below so you can go to where you want, like overclocking, benchmarks, closer look, so on and so forth? Or would you prefer maybe doing something like separate videos? So I'll have like Aorus review, BIOS settings, Aorus review, benchmarks, Aorus review, overclocking, and do actually separate videos so you can go straight to it. Let me know in the description below what you prefer so I can kind of get a feel of what you guys would prefer in that case, because I'm kind of 50-50. I mean, on one hand, I like having just one solid video, but on the other hand, if people are searching for something very specific, like Aorus overclocking, then, you know, they might be able to find that. We're gonna go ahead and just do one video this time, but I might change up that approach when I get to my Ryzen reviews. So just let me know, description below. But let's go ahead and dive into this board because it looks great. Love the LED lighting effects. I love the Aorus branding that Gigabyte switched to. We have to see how the board actually does though. So let's go ahead and follow us up, go on with a closer look. All right, let's take a closer look at this motherboard before we get it installed and everything put together, because it'll be a little bit harder to see everything that's going on. And I'm not saying that you're gonna be able to see everything from the camera here, but it'll give you a good enough idea, especially if you are trying to purchase this board or if you own it already and trying to answer some questions, should give you a good idea what's going on. So first off, I really like what Gigabyte's doing. This Aorus branding for gaming, it's looking fantastic. Really like that. We've got the metal reinforced PCI slots, metal reinforced RAM slots. So yeah, this looks excellent. It looks like a gamer board now, but what surprises me is how much it isn't a gaming board with some of the more advanced features. So let's go through a little bit of this closely. Now, first off, we have some buttons here. We have your typical like power and reset buttons, but we also have like an eco mode and an overclock button so that you can, you know, either overclock easily or do as much power saving as you possibly can. Okay, we got two M2 slots, one up here, one in the bottom. So I've seen some boards end up with 3. This one only ends up with 2. We have quite a few fan headers. So, you know, if you're wanting to run all your fans from the board, you've got that option. I tend to run mine with fan controllers, or in this case, I've got grid pluses that I use on different things. So I appreciate having fan headers to a certain degree, but they are not as important as they used to be, for me anyway. But it's always good to have that option. I've got 2 USB 3.0 headers, so that is kind of handy. Let's start getting down into the nitty-gritty of this board now, because there's some things going on down here that's really easy to overlook, but are actually kind of really neat features. So first off, we have the Soundcore 3D and the amp up audio. I'm pretty sure that the only way you're going to benefit from Soundcore and amp up audio is if you're plugged into the back ports. If you're using the audio header, it looks like it's using an Intel HD driver, which is not going to do the same for you. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Now down here we have a couple little switches here, and I'm going to get in a little close and just try to remember some of these things. I read through it all, but it's hard to remember. Okay, so this first little switch down here is by the audio header is an audio amp switch. And if I remember, it can switch from either 2.5 times amplification or up to 6.5, somewhere around there. So basically you can choose to either boost your audio a little bit or boost it a lot. And so I thought that was kind of cool. I'm really starting to enjoy quality audio, and I'm starting to really see that these kind of features could be hugely beneficial. We even have a little audio DAC that you can switch out to change the tone of your sound if you know how to do that stuff. I'm not quite there yet, so I would just stick with the one that Gigabyte supplies. So if we keep going through here, we have two more little switches here. We have a little LED pin for like the demo, and I'm kind of curious if I can jump that and just have the demo lights going all the time. This sounds kind of fun. But anyway, dual BIOS. So the top switch actually switches which BIOS you want to use, whether you want to use your main one or your backup one. And the bottom switch tells you whether it's actually dual BIOS or single BIOS mode. So yeah, I thought that was kind of neat the way they did that to give it a little bit more of an option. There's also, your BIOS chips are right here, and there's an LED light on those BIOS chips that will tell you which one you're using. So at least this is what it looks like it was. We'll verify all that when we get her booted up. So that's a kind of a neat feature. Motherboards have definitely advanced a lot since, you know, I've gotten, I've been stuck on AM3 Plus for a while. I'm very excited about this. So, all right, we've got some typical things like your USB ports and stuff, and that's not a big deal. Now, right here, we've got 5 little LED indicators to show status of CPU, RAM, PCI slots. Let me take a quick peek over here, see if I can see it. Can't quite see it from here, but various components on your motherboard to see the health of them. So I thought that was pretty good. Nice little visual indicator, see if there's something going on. Right here, next to these switches, we have the RGB header that also has the white light header. So normally these things are 4 pins, but this one's a 5 pin because it has that white light pin to add to it. So I thought that was pretty cool. This little guy here, it's not little, it's kind of big compared to anything. We got this big connector that says TPM on it. If you're not familiar with TPM, it's basically a security feature that when you plug a device into it, it ensures that the only way that device will work is if it can connect and communicate with whatever's plugged in a TPM header. Probably won't find a use for that, but I work in a hospital. I've actually seen one of these plugged into a computer just through a USB port. And that TPM device was to keep somebody from just running off with some medical equipment and being able to use it because the equipment would not work if it cannot connect. Being a pin in the motherboard makes more sense to me because it'd be a lot harder to grab the TPM connecting device and the actual equipment that communicates with it if it's inside of a computer like that. So nice little feature there for security. Probably not something for your average user that you'd use, but if you were trying to find something that you need to throw into a hospital or a secure environment, it'd be nice to know you had that option. So yeah, we're pretty well good to go. This guy right here is a little connector for Thunderbolt. So you can add a Thunderbolt add-in card to give you some extra ports, and then it communicates through here as well. So yeah, nice little feature there. Man, trying to go through all this stuff. There's so many things happening on this board. So we've covered quite a bit of everything. Oh yes, these little 2-pin headers. I saw a few of these through the board, wanted to make sure I knew what they were, and they were what I thought they were. They are thermal headers that can allow you to, they've actually, Gigabyte includes 2 cables with the thermal sensors that you can plug in those headers to monitor temperatures at different spots wherever you want to put that thermal sensor in your case. So I think that's kind of cool. I don't use thermal sensors that much, but I appreciate the option. Got a U2 port, so that's going to be new. We've seen the Z170 chipsets. We're kind of used to SATA M2s and SATA Express. U2 is new. Of course, we're still waiting for some things from Intel to really get that rolling, but it's there. It's available. When we start having drives that can use it, you would be good to go. So one of the other things I want to cover before I turn this board around is going to be right up here. There's some voltage meters, so you can plug your you can actually contact your multimeter to some metal contacts somewhere up here in the top and measure out all the voltages that are being supplied to your motherboard. So that's the as quick of an overview as I could do of the features right here in the front of our face. I'm going to turn this thing around and we're going to look at the actual I/O panel and look at a couple things there too. Okay guys, amidst my review of my closer look, I realized that I was calling all the USB ports 3.1s and they're not all 3.1s. So let's do it right this time. So yeah, take a quick look at this I/O shield. So everything on the back is at least 3.0 or upwards. And as you can see, I've got quite a bit going on here. I've already got a few things plugged in. So one of the things I really like that Gigabyte did is they've included these port covers, which is really cool. Because, you know, if you got a graphics card, you're not going to use these things. So you can cover them, keep them safe. They won't get covered in dust. Won't have to worry about somebody trying to plug a USB device into them and messing it up or anything like that. These top two ports are DAC up ports. They're 3.0 ports that you can control the voltage in them and boost that voltage a little bit, which is pretty awesome. Get you some better sound on your headsets. You can also DAC up the 3.0 headers on the board as well. So yeah, if I unplug these two guys, I've got just two standard 3.0 ports there. We have two LAN ports. One is an Intel, which should usually be this bottom one right here. And then the other one, because you know the Aorus is kind of becoming very similar on other setups. And then this is a Killer 2500 LAN port, which the Killer 2500 does seem to be working really well. I've used it a little bit and have not been disappointed with it. USB 3.1 Type-C right there. Also kind of like a little bit of a Thunderbolt type port as well. Looks like it's compatible with all of it. We have two more 3.0 type ports. Actually, this red one is 3.1. And then you got a 3.0 right here as well. So decent amount of ports, audio, optical, pretty normal stuff. So yeah, but like mainly really wanted to point out the DAC ups because that's kind of a neat feature that is somewhat unique to Aorus. I believe I've seen it on a couple other boards, but it's definitely not something you see very often. And I think it can be kind of nice for getting a little boosted sound. All right, I think you got it right this time. Let's see how we go from here. Okay guys, one last closer look. I just wanted to get a really good look at this lighting effect. So yeah, just look at the number of LEDs Gigabyte has thrown into this board, and it just looks fantastic. So you got our nice light bar. Of course, I've got some, you know, NZXT hues to help with that. But yeah, look at that. We've got lighting on the I/O shield. We've got lighting here on the sound. On just all these kind of covers, we've got lighting. There's two LEDs on the V-arms there, two LEDs right there, just above, right around the CPU cooler. These RAM slots, you know, I have the lighting from the Gale RAM, but there's also LED lighting going up the channel to light the channel around the RAM. So it's kind of like, well, I would like lighted RAM, but if I don't have lighted RAM, I kind of almost have lighted RAM. This little light bar here can be exchanged with a different pattern. I tried finding where I could buy them at, but I didn't see anything that really jumped out at me, and I kind of like that design anyway. So yeah, that looks great. And then, you know, Gigabyte also has some lighting within the PCI slots. They've got three LEDs on this bottom one. They've actually got three LEDs right there behind my graphics card. So just really, really great lighting effects. I kind of wish, so the only thing is, right now I've got it on a color cycle, which I love. But I kind of wish they had like a rainbow or spectrum wave type cycle so that the colors, there'd be multiple colors coming through the board at any given time rather than only one color cycling to the next at a time. But, you know, with all my Hue Plus and Kraken lighting going on there, it's not really all that noticeable, and it just makes the whole system look great. So yeah, closer look at that lighting. Love it. Looks fantastic. Let's go ahead and move on now. Okay, let's talk about overclocking Kaby Lake here for a little bit. Now, first I'm going to talk about the chip itself, because that doesn't have anything to do with Gigabyte in this particular case. And well, I feel like we've got a legitimate complaint here, and it's not one, not going to say anything that nobody else, that a lot of people haven't already said. But let's face it, that thermal interface, thermal paste material that Intel is using is garbage. The temperatures on Kaby Lake are way higher than they need to be. And let's just face it. Why can't, even if Intel's going to do this to save cost on the majority of their chips, why can't they at least solder the lids on their K series, if nothing else? If they at least solder the K series chips, then overclockers can get that. And they charge more for the K series anyway. Even if, I would say if a 7700K was 20 bucks more for a soldered lid, I would be okay with that, because then I wouldn't have to worry about trying to buy another, well, $20 or $30 kit to delid it so I could get that better performance and better cooling. I do not understand why Intel is doing that. And I'm gonna go into way more details on that down the road, but right now, that was probably the most disappointing thing about Kaby Lake. I've got a Kraken X62. It's a 280mm radiator. It's not a custom liquid cooling loop, but it should be able to keep that chip fairly cool. So, you know, on that level, that was a disappointment, but that has nothing to do with the Aorus, because the Aorus did a fantastic job. So I was playing around with this guy, and granted, I ended up having to change how I was doing my stress testing because I didn't like how quick my temperatures would get high. But with the Aorus, I had no trouble pushing anything. Now, of course, I have the Gale Evo X memory, and, you know, barring what the memory itself could handle, no issues pushing the clocks up, pushing the voltages up. You know, anything to where I felt safe. You know, I was able to bump up my RAM frequencies by a notch by upping my voltage to 1.4 on the modules. I was able to get 4.8 gigs on my 7700K with just a meager 1.3 volt V-core, even though I was using a pretty aggressive LLC setting. But that's a really good clock speed. I have no doubt that I have one of those 5 gigahertz plus chips on my hands there. And if I just set the V-core to 1.4 and then found a good stable place using like a medium stress bench test, I could probably do it. But here's the thing, I don't want to just push the limits of my chip. I want it to have a very comfortable temperature in gaming so that my fans aren't instantly maxing out every time I load a game. And even at 4.8 gigs, as soon as I loaded a game like Rise of the Tomb Raider, the fans instantly hit a point where they're 100% speed and it drops back down. But it's just, I can tell I'm kind of pushing the limits for day-to-day use and gaming use at 4.8 with just a meager 1.3 V-core. I mean, I remember when 1.45 was really pushing it. So the Gigabyte board on overclocking is just fantastic. It did a great job. The VRM seemed to keep really reasonable temperatures. Everything ran really stable. One of the other things I really like with Gigabyte, and I don't know if this is just them or just an Intel thing, but I'm going to assume it has a little bit to do with them, and that's the fact that if I set things off and my OS had trouble booting, the Aorus would go through a boot loop for a little bit and then reset its settings for me and let me change things without having a hard restart or freezing up the system. Now, I have a feeling if I pushed the clock too aggressively, it still would have froze. But Gigabyte had a really good tolerance for, okay, well, that wasn't exactly stable, but we were able at least to reboot you and let you change your settings again. So on overclocking, the Gaming 7 was fantastic. Great overclocking board, really great performance. So let's go ahead and move on to the next section, talk a little bit more about what this board can do. Okay guys, let's look at this BIOS here. So I'm going to explain maybe a couple settings as I go, but I am not going to do a very exhaustive every setting on the BIOS. I might do that with like an overclocking guide at some point if I can really familiarize myself with this chipset. But initially I'm just going to focus on just showing you how this is all set up so you can kind of see what this BIOS looks like. So we have our advanced frequency settings, and this is where you would do a lot of your manual overclocking. You've got base clock, which a lot of times you want to leave your base clock alone for simple ratios. It's when you get to the clock ratio that you want to change that if you want to do it manually. The CPU upgrade actually worked out pretty well. The presets for the 4.6, 4.8 seem to work pretty well. I didn't want to push the 5 gigs because I like my temperature, I like my overclock to be what would be a solid day-to-day use. If you want to keep your temperatures low and you have good cooling, I still feel like 4.8 might be kind of your limit on the 7700K. Not because it's not capable of more, but because of how bad that thermal paste is on between the lid and the chip. It just gets so hot, and if you don't want those fans just wreaking havoc on your noise levels, you're probably going to be kind of capping out at 4.7, 4.8 just because of that thermal paste job, which is sad. But yeah, you go to your advanced CPU core features. There's just so much here. I don't think there'd be much that you'd need to change for overclocking. You're probably going to leave most of it alone. Disable your turbo boost technology. I would probably just get that. Right now, It's set to enabled. I forget why I just set to raw enabled, but if you change that to auto, that'd probably work fine too. Yeah, the turbo boost for overclocking you probably disabled. All these package power limits and stuff are probably fine to leave alone. Your C1E and all these different C state settings, though, I would disable for manual overclocking, just so that way you don't have power features causing instability. You can play around with re-enabling them after you're stable and make sure it doesn't cause any instability problems, but at least in my experience with AMD, any C1 state, any C state would cause an instant instability with a manual overclock. So yeah, once again, we got some more settings here. There's a lot of stuff going on. I'd like to go through those more when I have more time and more experience with the chipset. But for now, I think that would get you a decent overclock. Use the extreme memory profile. It will get you the settings for your memory that are factory set and usually factory overclocked. You can manually do those and the advanced memory setting as well. So if you change your memory timing mode to manual or advanced manual, then you can change timings. You keep your channel interleaving, rank interleaving enabled so that you can change just one set of timings and it'll go across all of your DIMMs. So you can change that. You know, typical overclocking of DDR4, the CAS latency, TRCD, TRP, and TRAS. Those are gonna be the four that you'll usually mess with. And a lot of people will even just leave everything auto and maybe just mess with the CAS if they want to try to reduce those latencies a little bit. You can see I had some manual timings there when I overclocked my RAM. Yeah, this actually turned out to be not too bad. DDR4 was kind of fun to overclock and it wasn't as difficult as I thought it would be. So yeah, not too bad. Also, probably because I had this Gigabyte BIOS, which is helpful. Power settings, you've got your load line calibration. On this one, you can't hit enter and see the actual value. So I found you just have to press plus or minus. I put mine to turbo. I recommend just going turbo if you're gonna do manual overclocking. But otherwise, you can just stick it with auto if you're just gonna run stock settings. V-core there, of course you can set that. I set it to a 1.3 V-core and was able to get 4.8, which was great. I really thought that was a good overclock there. Voltage control, that one I wouldn't mess with. I'd leave it auto because that one could be a little risky. DRAM voltage, of course, if you've got the profile, that'll jump up to 1.35 in the case of the memory I'm using. But you can go up to 1.5 volts probably on that and not risk too heavy. Well, 1.4, once you get over to 1.5 and above, you might be risking some memory. But we can also just kind of see how much farther we can go. And as you can see, we can raise that voltage quite a bit, up to 2 volts. That might not be safe for the RAM. We'll discard those settings when we're done. So here's the system, BIOS. We got Windows 8 10 features, which is UEFI boot. So if you enable that, you'll be good to go. Peripherals, everything there is pretty straightforward. It's just you can customize things how you want. But I did want to show you the RGB Fusion. Nice little graphical interface to change your settings. I keep mine on color cycle, but it's just pretty handy there so you can change your LEDs the way you want them. Chipset, everything there, pretty straightforward. And we don't want to quit just yet. And then power settings, save and exit. And then finally, if you come over here, you can see just a quick overview of what your system is currently running at. If you come here, you can go to your smart fan, which looks like that. You can actually set your own fan curve, which is pretty fantastic. You can come to your Q flash, which you can update the BIOS pretty easily. Make sure you format your USB drive FAT32. It just seems to work better that way. NTFS seems to not like BIOS programs. And then, you can switch it to easy mode if you just want to do some very simple setting changes and not have to feel like you need to understand what's going on. So there you go. That's a quick look at the BIOS. Let's go ahead and move on, see how the testing looks. So let's talk about how I did my benchmark testing on this motherboard. Let's just be brutally honest about benchmarks on motherboards. They're almost pointless. And when I say that's because really the board itself is not as crucial to your results as much as just the other parts are. A lot of your benchmarks are relying on your CPU, it's relying on your memory, it's relying on your graphics cards. So when you sit there and you're like, I'm gonna benchmark this motherboard, you know, I mean, what are you really benchmarking? I'm sure there's ways to get deep into that and no man's land of figures. But when we benchmark a motherboard, what we're really looking for is we're trying to see if the motherboard doesn't live up to expectations more than we're trying to say, well, which one's going to perform the absolute best. I feel like where our motherboards are really going to shine is in overclocking and various features. So when I benchmark, I'm trying to figure out, all right, what is the best benchmarks I can do that are going to give me a very average feel versus the extremes and the lows. So in this particular case, that's exactly what I did with the Aorus. I also don't have a ton of other Z270s to compare to yet, so I can't really see a lot of anomalies that I might see if I had more boards. So really, we're just benchmarking this thing to put some figures on it to say, hey, do we see anything that looks really off? And of course, I can tell you right now, nothing looked off. Everything looked great. On the CPU testing, I found that I really like CPU Mark. It's a very straightforward benchmark. It may be a little bit legacy, but it just does a really good job. Their overall score and their single thread score just always feels like it gives me a very good, hey, this is about where you're at, especially for older type software, single thread programs and stuff. And on that, of course, the Z7700K single thread performance was through the roof. I mean, I scored over 2600 on that, which is fantastic. But when you look at the overall score, we're still up in like the 12,000. Everything was really good there. As far as though, I feel like a more modern benchmark that kind of shows the potential of newer software with CPUs, Cinebench R15 still seems to take the crown. And once again, no anomalies, everything looked great. Everything looked like what you would normally expect on Cinebench. Another point that I wanted to show was though memory, their speeds, and the L3 caches. And so I went ahead and threw some benchmarks on that and showed some speeds there. I haven't had DDR4 until this chipset, so I don't have a ton to compare to. I did throw some comparisons to my old 990FX chipset just to show how far we've come, and really memory has come a long ways with DDR4. Performance was fantastic compared to DDR3. So when we look at that, we can really see the benefit. You can also see though that the Aorus board was not having trouble maintaining those high DDR4 speeds. And this board is supposed to be able to support up to 4000 megahertz DDR4. I don't see that being a problem. I couldn't get to 4000 with the memory kits that I have, but I really don't see that being a huge issue. I would love to have been able to push that line, but then again, for an average gaming system, you're not going to have any trouble throwing 3000, 3200 megahertz RAM and getting a good performance out of it. No bottlenecking there. So yeah, good performance. The last thing I wanted to really do on this is I wanted to see if there's any anomalies in the gaming section. And then to do this, I didn't want to just show average and minimum frame rates. I'd love to do frame capture, like an actual frame capture to really show the 99th percentile. I have researched that and I've concluded that I do not have the equipment to pull that off. So what I did is I graphed a plot line of actual frames per second in Rise of the Tomb Raider to look for dips and anything that would happen. And I went ahead and compared that to my older system. I was impressed that my old 8350 kept up well in that game. It just shows that Tomb Raider has some pretty good optimizations to multi-core CPUs as far as performance is concerned. I ran a DirectX 11 and a DirectX 12 run, and overall both performed really well. It also just shows though that my video card is not strong enough to reach the bottleneck of either processor, which is fine because that's not what I'm trying to show. That said, if you look at the graphs, you can see a couple of points where the older 990FX had a couple of really sharp dips, and the new Z270 chipset and the Aorus motherboard kept a nice smooth curve. And that tells me that there's nothing in this motherboard that I can find that is hindering the performance of your system. And that's really what I wanted to see. Is there anything within the board itself that could be hindering performance? And I just can't see that, at least with my resources. So I think on a testing level, the Aorus has done a fantastic job. So I think that pretty well covers everything. Let's go ahead and wrap this review up and give her an award. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap up this review, give it an award. So we have the Aorus Gaming 7 here. It really was a fantastic board. We had phenomenal overclocking performance, at least, especially for just how well it overclocked on the voltages that I gave it. We had really good benchmarks, I mean, as good as I can tell. We had just really good features, nice looking design. Everything is just fantastic on this board. But I think the big thing about the Aorus, Gigabyte has a lighting setup on their boards that is just brilliant. I love the way that they light up like the PCI lanes. I love the way that they've got like a light string that's going down the RAM slots. And I know you might be looking at my system and thinking, are you sure that's not just your light up RAM? I'm sure that is not just the light up RAM. That is actually part of the board. We even have the nice little light bar there that we can change if we want to, although the design that I see isn't something that I would think is worth changing. Lighting on the I/O shield, the lighting just looks great on this board. It is just a beautiful, beautiful board. I love what Aorus is doing. In fact, there's only one thing I would say about the lighting on this guy, and that would be, I'd like to see it. I'd like to see, maybe like a rainbow effect where it'll cycle multiple lights at the same time versus just one color phasing into another color. So that would be kind of cool, but I don't know if that's something that would be, be neat if that was just a BIOS update. If not, I'd like to see that in the future on future motherboards. So yeah, I mean, all considering, this is easily one of my favorite boards just looking at it. Now, I don't have a ton of experience on the Z270 chipset though, so it's a little unfair for me to say that. But overall, I still really like it. We've got lots of metal reinforcement around our slots to help secure it from being sheared. It's just a lot of good quality features, great performance. It is very easy to say, you know what, the Aorus gets a Pure Overclock Editor's Choice Award. Now, unfortunately, all this stuff is going to set you back a pretty penny. I found this board for $240 on both Newegg and Amazon, but at least Amazon gives you some prime shipping, which helps. But there you have it, guys. That's a pretty good price to pay for a motherboard, but it's also kind of normal for Intel. Intel boards are more expensive, and that's just kind of the way it is. So, but considering how much features are giving you, I think Gigabyte's offering a lot. In their Aorus brand, they're offering a lot for $240 in comparison to other boards. So yeah, definitely an editor's choice. Definitely recommend it. I love their BIOS setup. I love how clean and how smooth everything worked. This is an excellent board. If you are considering it, I definitely recommend it. So yeah, let me know in the comments below what you think of this review. Any suggestions? I've got multiple more boards coming up, so I'd love to hear them. I'm going to be trying to make these reviews as useful to you guys as I can, but you know how it is. It's a learning curve and trying to get into a system. So just let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe to my channel if you like what I'm doing and want to help me out. I'd greatly appreciate it. And I will catch you later. Wait a minute, why did I say, I could have said I was Batman. I could be Batman. Why did I say I could be the Vulture?